everyone, Darkball Trades here. I want to keep this part short, so today I'm going back to what I love the most, and that is answering questions. Fortunately, I found a short by a channel called Bill Morgan Channel. I'm going to guess his name is Bill Morgan, so I'll call him Bill. In my very slight investigation into him, I looked into his YouTube's bio. Just for fun, I'm going to go over it very quickly so you all get a sense of what we're looking at today. So when he says he's been building his reputation for the past 20 years, he's a go-to creationist guru, whatever that actually means. He writes a prolific amount of pamphlets, tracts, and comics, all self-published, all featuring correspondence with a few PhDs sympathetic to creationism that give his literature the sheen of science. The sheen of science, all right. With titles such as 219 Reasons to Believe in God and Design, The Flood of Noah, Ridiculous Myth or Scientifically Accurate, and How Long Ago Did Adam and Eve Live? They circulate through Orange County Christendom and beyond. Much of his writing is compiled on his website, fishdon'twalk.com, on which his 500-slide PowerPoint presentation defending creationism and attacking evolution is freely available to anybody who wants it. He has been a featured speaker at hundreds of churches, even some mosques nationwide. Okay, so a creation science advocate? I don't know what his actual qualifications for any formal education are, so I'm not feeling confident at the start here. Oh well. So out of sheer morbid curiosity, though there was no way I was going to watch a 500-slide PowerPoint presentation, Kent Hovind much, I checked out his website, or at least I tried to. Turns out it doesn't seem to be active anymore. But let's give him a chance. The short today is titled, 2 Great Questions to Ask an Atheist. Well, there are some pretty great questions that one could ask an atheist. How are you doing is a good one. Would you like this bag of money is another good one. But enough about that. I'm sure Bill Morgan, Science Gorgon, has some great questions for atheists. Let's see what he has to say.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
Greetings. I would like to share with you what I think are the 2 best questions to ask an atheist.
Now, I don't want to criticize anyone else's video styles, as mine isn't exactly big budget, but I just want to take a moment and look at his body language. He looks super awkward, like he doesn't usually speak to people. And what specifically stood out to me is how he moved his 2 fingers when he talks. It just looks like bad acting. This has nothing to do with the video itself, it just looked so awkward that it was actually jarring to me. Anyway, I interrupted. Go on, Bill.
I was evangelizing yesterday.
Oh good, he's an evangelist as well. Well, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Maybe he was in his church or something and he isn't actually one of those awful street evangelists that bother everyone who are just trying to go about their day. But again, I interrupted. I really need to focus. Let's keep going.
And I asked a young man, what do you think will happen to you after you die?
Let's talk about what just happened here. With no setup at all, Bill approaches a stranger on the street and immediately asks them about their mortality. Now I want to take a step back and really think about this interaction. Imagine you're walking down the street in Orange County or any relatively busy city, maybe grabbing lunch or heading to work. Suddenly, a stranger stops you and asks you what you think happens after you die. Not, hello, or how are you? Straight to existential questions about death. This isn't just awkward, it's a pretty significant breach of social boundaries. There's something to consider here from a philosophical perspective. This approach assumes that people aren't already grappling with questions of mortality in their own way. It presumes that strangers need to be confronted with their own mortality as if we're not aware of it. This is particularly interesting because it reflects a common misconception among street evangelists, that people simply haven't thought about these big questions before. Sure, some people haven't, but really, how many non-Christians in the US haven't been taught about Mr. Jesus against their will or otherwise? The reality is that most people have considered their mortality. They develop their own beliefs, whether religious, secular, or somewhere in between. They're not just necessarily interested in discussing these deeply personal matters with strangers on the street. You know who else asks strangers about death? Horror movie villains. I'm just saying, maybe that's not the company you want to keep with your conversation starters. This kind of approach is why most people have developed the street preacher shuffle. They carefully maneuver, avoiding eye contact while maintaining a brisk walking pace. Dealing with street preachers has become such a common occurrence that has essentially created its own social choreography, right up there with how we deal with the end is nigh sign carriers. The important thing to recognize here is that this isn't just about the question itself. It's about respect for personal boundaries and understanding that meaningful discussions about big life questions usually happen in appropriate contexts with willing participants. But maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this young man is willing. Maybe he wants to know the truth of the Lord. Let's keep going.
He said nothing. I asked him, do you believe in God? And he said no.
Okay, so chances are this young man did not initiate the conversation. He seems to be an atheist of some stripe. But this is something I have noticed a lot, which I'm sure many of you have as well, but maybe have not thought about it. Notice how Bill glosses over what seems to be the actual response. Nothing. Instead of engaging with that answer, he immediately pivots to, do you believe in God? This is a common tactic in these kinds of street encounters. Asking a loaded question, getting an answer, and then completely ignoring that answer to move straight on to the next prepared talking point. The young man's response of, nothing happens after you die, is actually a pretty clear and philosophically coherent point. It's the naturalistic view that consciousness ends with brain function. Simple, straightforward, and based on observable evidence. But rather than explore that or ask why that person holds that view, Bill jumps straight to the God question. It's like he's running through a script rather than having a real conversation. You know what would be interesting? If Bill had actually engaged with that first answer. Instead of, do you believe in God? How about, what makes you think that? Or, how did you come to that conclusion? But this would require actual dialogue rather than moving down a mental checklist of evangelism talking points. And you know how these people need to stick to that script.
And I said, why? Question number one to ask an atheist is to politely ask them, why don't you believe in God?
Let me address something right off the bat. Bill here emphasizes asking this question politely, as if the tone somehow makes up for the invasiveness of the question itself. While I can appreciate the intent to stay polite, here's the thing. Wrapping a rude question in polite language doesn't make it any less rude. It's like saying, with all due respect, why are you wrong about everything? The politeness is just window dressing on what's still fundamentally an invasive and presumptuous question. So Bill presents this as his first great question to ask an atheist. But let's examine why Christie boys think this is such a powerful question in the first place. From their perspective, they typically assume one of several things. The atheist must have been hurt by the church, because clearly the only reason someone wouldn't believe is emotional trauma, right? They just want to sin. The classic, you just want to live an immoral lifestyle assumption. They haven't really thought about it. My personal favorite, as if atheists just accidentally forgot to believe in God one day. But here's the thing. These assumptions reveal more about the Christy boys asking the question than the atheists they're questioning. It shows a fundamental lack of understanding or empathy for how people actually arrive at their philosophical positions. The reality is, atheists have as many different reasons for not believing in God as there are atheists. Here's just a few. Insufficient evidence, which is kind of a big one. Logical inconsistencies in religious claims. How about the problem of evil? The existence of multiple conflicting religions. Scientific explanations that make divine intervention unnecessary. The apparent absence of divine interaction in the modern world, and many more. But here's what's really interesting about this question. It subtly shifts the burden of proof. It's like asking, why don't you believe in unicorns? Well, why should I? The person making the extraordinary claim should provide the extraordinary evidence. You know what would be at least a slightly better question? What would convince you that a God exists? That at least opens up some genuine dialogue about evidence and reasoning rather than presuming there's something wrong with the atheist for not believing. And let's be real. If your evangelism strategy starts with essentially asking, what's wrong with you? Maybe it's time to workshop some new material.
He didn't have a good answer. He didn't have any answer, actually.
Okay, let's pause here because something interesting is happening. Notice how the story has shifted. First, Bill said that the young man said nothing to what happens after death. Then the young man said no to believing in God. But now suddenly he didn't have any answer actually?
And I was just like, really? I could give you like 17 right off the top of my head. You could wake me from a drunken stupor, I could still give you like 9.
This kind of shifting narrative is what we in the business call a red flag. It's giving me, trust me bro, energy. But let's be charitable and assume that this encounter happened exactly as Bill now claims it did. Let's say this young man, suddenly confronted by a stranger asking personal questions about his religious beliefs, didn't have a ready answer. So what? No, seriously, so what? Being unable to articulate why you don't believe something doesn't make that something true. If I stop someone on the street and ask them, why don't you believe in telepathic unicorns? They might be too bewildered to give a coherent answer. That doesn't mean telepathic unicorns exist. This is actually a pretty common tactic in street evangelism. Catch someone off guard, ask them complex philosophical questions that they weren't prepared to discuss while grocery shopping, then treat their lack of prepared response as some kind of victory for your side. It's like challenging random people to impromptu chess matches and declaring chess mastery because they can't beat you while carrying their laundry. Not having a ready answer doesn't mean someone's position is wrong. It might just mean they weren't expecting to defend their metaphysical worldview between picking up their dry cleaning and getting coffee. Some people spend their entire academic careers exploring these questions. Expecting a random person on the street to have a perfectly crafted response is about as reasonable as expecting them to perform an impromptu opera.
And then I shared with him, could I please share with you 2 facts that I think proves there is a God? He said, sure. I said, your eyes. Your 2 eyes are all the proof you need to know that there is a God.
We've arrived at everyone's favorite argument, the good old eyes prove God claim. That's like the greatest hits album of creationist arguments. Well, what track is Bill playing here? Is it Eyes Are Too Complex to Evolve, the Irreducible Complexity remix, or Look at the Trees, Nature's Beauty, featuring Divine Creator? Either way, this argument has more holes in it than a Swiss cheese factory. Let's break it down. If it's the complexity argument, I've covered this in other videos, so I'll touch on it briefly here. We actually know quite a lot about how eyes evolved. Darwin himself addressed this, and in the 150 plus years since, we've discovered an incredible amount about eye evolution. We can trace the development from simple light-sensitive cells all the way to complex camera-style eyes, with living examples of every major stage still existing in nature today. From flatworms with basic light-detecting cells, to mollusks with pinhole camera eyes, to fish, to mammals, it's like a living museum of eye evolution. Fun fact, octopi have better designed eyes than humans do. Our retinas are actually installed backwards, creating a blind spot where the optic nerve passes through. Octopus eyes don't have this flaw. If eyes were intelligently designed, seems like humans got the budget version. If it's the look at creation argument, this is circular reasoning at its finest. Use your eyes to see proof of God, which prove that eyes were designed by God, which proves God exists. That's not logic. That's a merry-go-round of reasoning that will make you dizzy. This is the kind of argument that sounds profound until you think about it for more than 5 seconds. It's like saying, your stomach is all the proof you need that Chef Boyardee exists. Just because something is complex or beautiful doesn't mean we can jump to supernatural conclusions about its origin. What's particularly interesting is that this argument is almost exclusively made by people who haven't actually studied eye evolution or the current scientific understanding of how these structures developed. It's equivalent to saying, I don't understand how this works, therefore it must be magic, which, historically speaking, hasn't been humanity's most reliable method of understanding the world.
To quickly summarize, they're much too complex to have happened by chance.
Called it. It's almost as if these people are so predictable.
I'm pleased to say after we talked for a while, he prayed to be forgiven and make Jesus Christ the Lord of his life.
Okay, let's talk about this dramatic conclusion to Bill's story. You know how these posts you see on social media where someone claims that their 3-year-old gave a profound speech about economic policy and then everyone in the grocery store bursts into applause? This is giving me that exact energy. Let's break it down. A random young man on the street, who apparently had no answers to basic questions about his atheism, after hearing groundbreaking arguments like, look at your eyes, suddenly converts to Christianity on the spot. Sure, Bill. And I bet right after that, Albert Einstein's ghost showed up and handed out $100 bills to everyone. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that this encounter did happen. There are 2 much more likely scenarios than a genuine conversion. Imagine being cornered by someone who won't let you leave until you agree with them. Sometimes, the path of least resistance is to just agree. It's like when your aunt won't stop talking about her essential oils business. Sometimes you just nod and say, yeah, I'll totally look into that, to escape that conversation. Being confronted by a stranger who's adamant about their beliefs can be incredibly uncomfortable, especially for younger people or those who aren't used to confrontation. Some people will say whatever they think will end the interaction the fastest. What's particularly telling is how this story fits perfectly into the evangelist street preacher's ideal narrative. The resistant non-believer, who, upon hearing their basic apologetics, immediately sees the light. It's the street preacher equivalent of a Hollywood ending. But here's what gets me. Even if this conversation was genuine, which I doubt more than I doubt the existence of diet water, what does it actually prove? That someone can be pressured into a religious commitment by a stranger on the street? That's not exactly a ringing endorsement for the truth of beliefs being pushed. Remember, folks, if a story ends with an atheist suddenly converting after hearing, "Just look at your eyes," it probably belongs in the same category as, "My girlfriend goes to another school. You wouldn't know her."
So don't be afraid, be polite to atheists, ask them why, and tell them that their eyes prove there is a God.
You know what? Bill's right about one thing. Don't be afraid to be polite to atheists. That's actually good advice, even if it's accidentally good advice. But maybe we can workshop some similarly compelling arguments using his logic. Your feet prove that the goddess Nike runs the one true shoe company. Your belly button proves the existence of the great cosmic lint roller. Your ability to digest Italian food proves that the flying spaghetti monster is real. You see how that works? Just pick any body part and arbitrarily connect it to whatever conclusion you'd like. It's like playing metaphysical Mad Libs. But seriously, if your go-to argument for the existence of an all-powerful universal creator is, "You have eyes," maybe it's time to go back to the philosophical drawing board. And that's the end of his video. So I'm going to quickly summarize what happened here. Bill recounts evangelizing to a young man the day prior asking, "What do you think happens after you die?" "Nothing." "Do you believe in God?" "No." "Why?" "Well." Then best question number 1. Politely ask him, "Why don't you believe in God?" The young man didn't have a good answer, or any answer actually, but then asks, "Could I please share with you 2 facts that I think proves there is a God?" The young man agrees. The proof is, your 2 eyes are all the proof you need that there is a God. Why? Because they're much too complex to have happened by chance. After that, the young man prayed to be forgiven and to make Mr. Jesus Christ the Lord of his life. And so the takeaway is, don't be afraid to be polite to atheists, ask them why, and then tell them that their eyes prove there's a God. So, what are the 2 great questions for atheists? I had caught question number 1, but what about question number 2? He doesn't actually explicitly say what question 2 is. If I had to guess, it would be, "Can I share with you something that I think proves God?" But this isn't phrased as an actual question in the script, but it could be retroactively interpreted as the second question because it acts as a segue to his argument? But I don't know. I mean, he asks what the young man who totally exists thinks will happen after he dies, so maybe that is a second question, just arranged in some backwards way where we start with dessert first? I don't know. That's it for this one. So I've given my response, but what do you think? Do you think these are really 2 great questions to ask an atheist? Or did the second one get lost somewhere between the eyes and the altar call? Maybe you have your own ideas about what would make a better question or a better proof. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. After all, we sharpen our arguments if we get away from a script and utilize discussion and curiosity, and we may even learn something new along the way. And hey, if you ever had to listen to someone tell you that your eyes are proof of a God, hit that like button. If you're looking to improve on your ability to have a deeper discussion about what really counts as evidence, hit that subscribe button, as I've got plenty more where this came from. Though speaking of depths of discussion, I need to give a deepest thanks to my patrons: Calamitous Anima, Sora, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Ooga Booga Luga, Anonymous Netizen, Angel, Tarek Alkasab, Gemabomb, Kai Henningsen, and Triple Towel. Though if you would like to be a totally real person in a situation that totally happened, trust me, you can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. As I look to do more on the YouTubes, you are all great encouragement. Thank you all for standing with me and giving me all the support you do. I hope to get my content out to more people, and liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, all of those help. The more we do that, the more we can call attention from the Most High algorithm. All hail the mighty algorithm. May he bless you all with superb content. And as always, keep learning.
So that's why my religion